The afternoon sun shone brightly over the tree-lined streets of Oakwood Heights. 12-year-old Andrew pedaled his blue bicycle slowly through the neighborhood, glancing down occasionally at his phone to check the address his classmate had sent him. This was his first time visiting this part of town. The houses were bigger here, with perfectly trimmed lawns and fancy cars parked in circular driveways. Andrew had earned a scholarship to Oakwood Academy this year. His mom always told him how proud she was, but he still felt out of place sometimes among his wealthy classmates. Today was important, though. He had a big science project due next week, and his group had decided to meet at his classmate Taylor's house to work on it together. It should be around here somewhere, Andrew mumbled to himself, slowing down to read the street signs more carefully. The neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional dog barking or lawn sprinkler running. He pulled over to the curb and double-checked the address on his phone. As Andrew stood straddling his bike, he didn't notice the woman watching him from behind her living room curtains. Nancy Miller had moved to Oakwood Heights just 3 months ago and had already joined the neighborhood watch group. She prided herself on being vigilant about suspicious activity, which, people had noticed, seemed to mostly involve watching people of color who visited the neighborhood. Andrew, deciding he needed a better view of the street signs, walked his bike closer to the corner of Nancy's property. He squinted up at the sign, trying to figure out if he needed to turn left or right. Nancy pushed open her front door and stepped onto her porch. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" she called out sharply. Andrew turned, surprised. Hello. I'm just trying to find my friend's house for our school project." Nancy crossed her arms. "What friend? Which house exactly?" Her tone made it clear she didn't believe him. "Taylor Chen. I think it's on Maple Court, but I'm having trouble finding it," Andrew explained politely, the way his mother had always taught him to speak to adults. Nancy's eyes narrowed. "Taylor Chen? I don't think I know any Chens in this neighborhood." She pulled out her phone. "What school did you say you go to?" "Oakwood Academy. We're in the same science class," Andrew said, beginning to feel uncomfortable with the questioning. He'd encountered this kind of suspicion before. "Oakwood? Really?" Nancy looked him up and down, taking in his simple jeans and hoodie. "Let me see your school ID then." Andrew frowned. "Ma'am, I'm just trying to find my classmate's house. I don't bring my school ID on weekends." Nancy started tapping on her phone. "Well, I'm part of the neighborhood watch, and we've had break-ins recently. You can't be too careful these days." Andrew's heart began to race. He knew what was happening. His mother had prepared him for moments like this, telling him to stay calm and respectful no matter what. "I understand, but I'm just a student looking for my friend's house," he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite his growing anxiety. Nancy was now openly recording him with her phone. "Don't move. I'm calling the police. If you're really supposed to be here, you won't have a problem waiting for them to arrive." Andrew felt a cold wave of fear. He'd seen news stories about situations like this going terribly wrong. With trembling hands, he reached for his own phone. "I need to call my mom," he said quietly. "Go ahead," Nancy snapped, stepping closer as if to prevent him from leaving. "The police will want to talk to your parents anyway." As Andrew dialed, Nancy turned slightly away to speak dramatically into her phone. "Yes, there's an unidentified boy in our neighborhood. He's acting suspiciously, looking at houses. No, I've never seen him before. Yes, I think you should send someone quickly." What Nancy didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have guessed as she made that call, was that Andrew's mother wasn't just any parent who would be worried about her son. As Andrew waited anxiously, phone pressed to his ear, the situation was about to take a turn that neither he nor Nancy could have anticipated. Andrew's fingers trembled slightly as he held the phone to his ear, waiting for his mother to answer. He turned his back to Nancy, who was still dramatically describing him to the police dispatcher as if he was some kind of dangerous criminal. He could hear her voice rising with fake concern. "Yes, he's been looking at all the houses. I've never seen him in this neighborhood before. I'm worried he might be planning something." After 3 rings, his mother picked up. "Hey, sweetie, how's it going? Did you find Taylor's house?" Andrew lowered his voice. "Mom, I need your help. I'm in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood trying to find Taylor's house, and this lady came out of her home and started questioning me. Now she's calling the police on me." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. When his mother spoke again, her voice was calm but had that special tone Andrew recognized, the one she used when she was angry but trying not to show it. "Where exactly are you? What street?" Andrew looked up at the street sign. "Corner of Maple and Oak Drive, I think. Mom, she's recording me with her phone and everything." "Listen to me carefully," his mother said, her voice steady and reassuring despite the seriousness of the situation. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't argue with her, but don't leave either." "I'll be there in less than 10 minutes. Just keep your phone on and stay calm." "Okay," Andrew whispered, feeling slightly better knowing his mother was coming. He knew she would handle this. She always did. Meanwhile, Nancy had finished her call and was standing with her arms crossed, watching Andrew with suspicion. Her mouth was set in a tight line, as if she'd caught a thief red-handed rather than a schoolboy looking for his friend's house. "The police are on their way," she announced loudly, as if proud of herself. "They take neighborhood safety very seriously in Oakwood Heights." Andrew nodded quietly, remembering his mother's advice from their many talks about situations like this. Stay calm, don't give them any reason to escalate things. "My mom is coming too," he said simply. Nancy gave a dismissive little huff. "Good, they can sort this all out. If you're really supposed to be here, there won't be any problem, will there?" A couple walking their golden retriever slowed down as they passed, staring at the scene unfolding on Nancy's lawn. Nancy noticed them and called out, "Everything's fine. Just checking on a suspicious person in the neighborhood. Police are on their way." The couple exchanged uncomfortable glances but continued walking, the woman looking back at Andrew with what seemed like concern. Andrew felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He wished he could disappear. All he'd wanted was to work on a science project with his classmates. 5 minutes passed that felt like 5 hours. Andrew stood awkwardly by his bike while Nancy kept her distance, still recording him intermittently with her phone. Occasionally, she'd mutter something about keeping our neighborhood safe, just loud enough for him to hear. Finally, a police car pulled up slowly, its lights on but no siren. 2 officers stepped out. A tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and a younger man with broad shoulders. Nancy immediately walked toward them, gesturing wildly in Andrew's direction. "That's him. He's been wandering around looking at houses." "I've never seen him here before," she said loudly. The female officer held up her hand. "Ma'am, we'll handle this. Please step back." As the officers approached Andrew, he felt his stomach tighten despite having done nothing wrong. The male officer spoke first. "Hey there, what's your name?" he asked, his tone neutral but watchful. "Andrew Johnson, sir," he answered politely. "I was just trying to find my classmate's house for a school project. I go to Oakwood Academy." The female officer was about to respond when another car pulled up behind the police cruiser. It was a sleek black SUV with government plates. Nancy was still talking animatedly to anyone who would listen when the driver's door opened and a woman stepped out wearing a tailored pantsuit. Andrew felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Mom," he said quietly. Nancy turned toward the new arrival, her complaint dying on her lips as recognition slowly dawned on her face. The female officer noticed the government plates on the black SUV and straightened her posture slightly. The male officer, Officer Rivera, according to his nameplate, had just begun questioning Andrew when they all turned to look at the woman approaching from the vehicle. Andrew's mother walked with purpose, her steps quick but measured. She wore a navy blue pantsuit with a small pin of the city's emblem on her lapel. Her face was a perfect mask of professional calm, but Andrew could see the fire in her eyes. He knew that look all too well. "Officers," she said with a nod as she reached the small group. "I'm Olivia Johnson." She didn't need to add her title. Both officers immediately recognized her. "Madam Mayor," Officer Rivera said, surprise evident in his voice. "We didn't realize." "That's my son," Mayor Johnson said simply, placing a protective hand on Andrew's shoulder. "What seems to be the issue here?" Nancy stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. The phone she'd been recording with now hung limply at her side. The mayor. She'd called the police on the mayor's son. The female officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, quickly filled in the details. "We received a call about a suspicious person in the neighborhood, ma'am. We were just beginning to assess the situation." Nancy found her voice, though it was noticeably higher than before. I didn't know he was your son, of course. We've had break-ins in the area, and when I saw him looking at houses, my son was looking for his classmate's house. Mayor Johnson interrupted calmly. Taylor Chen lives in this neighborhood. They have a science project to work on together. She turned to Officer Chen with a small smile. Any relation? Officer Chen shook her head. No, ma'am. Common last name. Andrew watched this exchange with a mixture of relief and lingering embarrassment. Other neighbors had begun to notice the commotion. A few people stood watching from their driveways or front yards. One man had walked closer, standing near enough to overhear. Officers, Mayor Johnson continued, I appreciate your quick response. I understand you were just doing your job. Her gaze shifted to Nancy, and though her voice remained measured, it took on a firmer edge. What I don't understand is why a child looking for a friend's house was immediately deemed suspicious enough to warrant a police call. Nancy's face flushed red. Well, I didn't. I didn't recognize him from the neighborhood. And that was enough to assume he was up to something criminal? Mayor Johnson asked. Officer Rivera glanced uncomfortably between the two women. Ma'am, he said to Nancy, do you have any specific behavior to report beyond the young man looking at houses and checking addresses? Nancy shifted her weight from one foot to another. Well, no, but... Then it appears there's no issue here, Officer Chen concluded professionally. She turned toward Andra. Sorry for the misunderstanding, young man. Andra nodded. It's okay, he said quietly, though everyone present could tell it wasn't really okay at all. The man who had been listening nearby stepped forward. I'm David Chen, he said. Taylor's father. Andra, we've been waiting for you. Our house is just around the corner. He looked at Mayor Johnson. Madam Mayor, it's an honor. I'm sorry your son experienced this on his way to our home. Nancy looked even more uncomfortable now, realizing she'd not only called the police on the mayor's son, but also on a child who was indeed expected in the neighborhood. Mayor Johnson thanked the officers for their professionalism and then turned her full attention to Nancy. The small crowd of neighbors had grown slightly, and many were watching with undisguised interest. Ms. Miller, Nancy supplied weakly. Nancy Miller. Ms. Miller, Mayor Johnson said, her voice clear enough for all the onlookers to hear. I think we need to have a conversation about what happened here today. Nancy swallowed hard, suddenly aware that this incident was far from over. In fact, it was about to become much bigger than she could have imagined. The female officer noticed the government plates on the black SUV and straightened her posture slightly. The male officer, Officer Rivera, according to his nameplate, had just begun questioning Andrew when they all turned to look at the woman approaching from the vehicle. Andrew's mother walked with purpose, her steps quick but measured. She wore a navy blue pantsuit with a small pin of the city's emblem on her lapel. Her face was a perfect mask of professional calm, but Andrew could see the fire in her eyes. He knew that look all too well. Officers, she said with a nod as she reached the small group. I'm Olivia Johnson. She didn't need to add her title. Both officers immediately recognized her. Madam Mayor, Officer Rivera said, surprise evident in his voice. We didn't realize. That's my son, Mayor Johnson said simply, placing a protective hand on Andrew's shoulder. What seems to be the issue here? Nancy stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. The phone she'd been recording with now hung limply at her side. The mayor. She'd called the police on the mayor's son. The female officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, quickly filled in the details. We received a call about a suspicious person in the neighborhood, ma'am. We were just beginning to assess the situation. Nancy found her voice, though it was noticeably higher than before. I didn't know he was your son, of course. We've had break-ins in the area, and when I saw him looking at houses, my son was looking for his classmate's house. Mayor Johnson interrupted calmly. Taylor Chen lives in this neighborhood. They have a science project to work on together. She turned to Officer Chen with a small smile. Any relation? Officer Chen shook her head. No, ma'am. Common last name. Andrew watched this exchange with a mixture of relief and lingering embarrassment. Other neighbors had begun to notice the commotion. A few people stood watching from their driveways or front yards. One man had walked closer, standing near enough to overhear. Officers, Mayor Johnson continued, I appreciate your quick response. I understand you were just doing your job. Her gaze shifted to Nancy, and though her voice remained measured, it took on a firmer edge. What I don't understand is why a child looking for a friend's house was immediately deemed suspicious enough to warrant a police call. Nancy's face flushed red. Well, I mean he was just. I didn't recognize him from the neighborhood. And that was enough to assume he was up to something criminal? Mayor Johnson asked. Officer Rivera glanced uncomfortably between the two women. Ma'am, he said to Nancy, do you have any specific behavior to report beyond the young man looking at houses and checking addresses? Nancy shifted her weight from one foot to another. Well, no, but... Then it appears there's no issue here, Officer Chen concluded professionally. She turned toward Andra. Sorry for the misunderstanding, young man. Andra nodded. It's okay, he said quietly, though everyone present could tell it wasn't really okay at all. The man who had been listening nearby stepped forward. I'm David Chen, he said. Taylor's father. Andra, we've been waiting for you. Our house is just around the corner. He looked at Mayor Johnson. Madam Mayor, it's an honor. I'm sorry your son experienced this on his way to our home. Nancy looked even more uncomfortable now, realizing she'd not only called the police on the mayor's son, but also on a child who was indeed expected in the neighborhood. Mayor Johnson thanked the officers for their professionalism and then turned her full attention to Nancy. The small crowd of neighbors had grown slightly, and many were watching with undisguised interest. Ms. Miller, Nancy supplied weakly. Nancy Miller. Ms. Miller, Mayor Johnson said, her voice clear enough for all the onlookers to hear. I think we need to have a conversation about what happened here today. Nancy swallowed hard, suddenly aware that this incident was far from over. In fact, it was about to become much bigger than she could have imagined. Nancy's face drained of color. You can't do that. You ruin my reputation in this community. Mayor Johnson remained calm, studying the woman across from her. Ms. Miller, do you understand what could have happened today? Do you read the news? Do you know what happens when police are called on black children for simply existing in spaces? Nancy's mouth tightened. That's not fair. I was just being cautious. Cautious would have been watching from your window. Cautious would have been asking my son if he needed help finding an address. Mayor Johnson's voice grew quieter, more intense. What you did was assume the worst based on how he looked. That's not caution, Ms. Miller. That's prejudice. Nancy stood up suddenly. I'm not prejudiced. Some of my colleagues are black. The mayor didn't react to this tired defense. She'd heard it too many times before. Instead, she walked to the mantelpiece where family photos were displayed. You have children, she observed, looking at a photo of two smiling teenagers. Yes, Nancy answered, her voice uncertain. My son is in college now. My daughter's a senior in high school. Mayor Johnson nodded. Have they ever been stopped by police while riding their bikes? Nancy hesitated. No. Have they ever had someone film them and call 911 while they were looking for a friend's house? No, but... That's the difference, Mayor Johnson said simply. My son is 12 years old. This was his first time experiencing something like this, but statistically it won't be his last. Each time, he'll carry that fear, that shame, that anger. Each time, I'll worry whether he'll come home safely. She turned to face Nancy directly. That's why I can't just let this go with a private conversation. This isn't about punishing you. It's about making sure this community understands what happened today and why it matters. Nancy sank back onto the sofa. So you're going to name me publicly. My husband works at the bank. People will boycott us. They'll call me terrible names online. For the first time, Mayor Johnson's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing her genuine exhaustion. Ms. Miller, I understand you're worried about consequences. But I need you to understand that my son faced consequences today for something he didn't do, for something he couldn't control. She sat down across from Nancy. The press conference will happen. But what exactly I say depends partly on what happens in the next 24 hours. Nancy looked up. What do you mean? I mean that actions speak louder than words. Apologies matter, but they're just the beginning. The mayor's tone was firm, but not unkind. I'm inviting you to attend the community forum on racial bias that my office is hosting next week. Not as someone being punished, but as someone willing to learn. Nancy looked down at her hands. The silence stretched between them. Outside, a car door slammed. Through the window, they could see Nancy's husband getting out of his car, looking confused at the mayor's vehicle in his driveway. Mayor Johnson stood up. "I should go. Please think about what I've said." She moved toward the door but stopped and turned back. "Ms. Miller, we're neighbors now. That means something in this city. I'd like to believe that we can all do better by each other." Nancy's husband opened the front door, surprise registering on his face when he saw the mayor standing in his living room. "Harold," Nancy said, her voice strained. "This is Mayor Johnson." Harold's eyes widened as he slowly pieced together what must have happened. "Mayor Johnson, He looked at his wife, then back at the mayor. "Is everything okay?" Mayor Johnson offered a polite smile. "Your wife and I were just having an important conversation about community safety and bias. I'm sure she'll fill you in." She turned back to Nancy. "I'll expect your response about the community forum by tomorrow morning." As she walked out the door, she heard Harold ask in a low, worried voice, "Nancy, what did you do?" Behind her in the house, Nancy began to cry, the weight of her actions finally sinking in as she tried to explain to her husband why the mayor of their city was standing in their living room discussing racial bias. By evening, the story had spread throughout Oakwood Heights. Neighbors called neighbors. Text messages buzzed back and forth. Several people had recorded parts of the confrontation on their phones, and clips began circulating in community group chats. Andra, meanwhile, had spent the afternoon working on the science project at Taylor's house, trying his best to focus despite what had happened. Taylor's family had been kind and understanding, even offering to drive him home afterward instead of having him bike back through the neighborhood. "Mom's coming to get me," Andrew explained when Mrs. Chen asked. She texted she'd be here at 6. At home that evening, Andrew sat at the kitchen table pushing food around his plate while his mother made phone calls in her home office. He could hear snippets of her conversations, something about a press statement and community meeting. His father, who had rushed home early from his hospital shift after hearing what happened, sat across from him. "You want to talk about it?" his dad asked gently. Andrew shrugged, then looked up. "Why did she think I was doing something wrong?" "I was just looking for an address." His father sighed deeply. "Some people see what they expect to see, not what's actually there. It's not fair, and it's not right." "But I'm just a kid," Andrew said, his voice smaller than usual. "I know, buddy." His father reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "And that's what makes me angry about this whole thing. But I'm proud of how you handled yourself. You stayed calm, you called your mom, you did everything right." When Mayor Johnson finally joined them, she looked tired but determined. She hugged Andrew tightly before sitting down. "What's going to happen now?" Andrew asked. "Tomorrow there's going to be a press conference," she explained. "I need to address what happened because it's important for everyone to understand that this kind of thing isn't acceptable in our city." "Are you going to talk about me?" Andrew asked nervously. His mother shook her head. "I won't use your name. This isn't about embarrassing you. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to other kids." Later that night, Andrew's phone buzzed with messages from his classmates. Word had spread at school too. "Dude, is it true?" texted his friend Devin. "Someone called the cops on you." "You ok?" asked another friend. Andrew stared at the messages, unsure how to respond. He didn't want to be known as that kid, the one something bad happened to. But at the same time, he felt a strange kind of strength knowing that his mother was going to use what happened to try to make things better. Across town, Nancy sat in her darkened living room, her husband Harold beside her. The TV was on, but neither was watching it. After Mayor Johnson had left, they'd had a long, difficult conversation. Harold had listened to Nancy's explanation with growing disbelief and disappointment. "I didn't think," Nancy had stammered. "That's the problem," Harold had replied. "You didn't think." Now they sat in uncomfortable silence until Harold finally spoke again. "You need to make this right." Nancy nodded slowly. "The mayor invited me to some community forum thing. And I guess I'll go." She twisted her hands in her lap. "Harold, what if people find out? What if it gets in the papers? What will everyone think?" Harold turned to look at her. "Nancy, a boy could have been hurt because of what you did today. Maybe it's time to worry less about what people think of you and more about the damage you could have caused." Nancy's phone pinged with a notification. It was an email from the mayor's office with details about the community forum. Her finger hovered over it, reluctant to open it. Harold watched her hesitation. "This isn't going away, Nance. You can either be part of fixing it, or you can hide and let everyone else decide who you are." Nancy took a deep breath and opened the email. As she read through the details, something shifted in her expression, a mix of dread and reluctant determination. Morning came with news vans parked outside City Hall. Mayor Johnson stood at the podium, cameras flashing as she prepared to address the press about the incident that had occurred in Oakwood Heights. An incident that was about to spark a citywide conversation about bias, safety, and what it truly means to be a community. The City Hall steps were crowded with reporters and community members. Camera crews had set up their equipment, and people held signs with messages like, "Biking while black is not a crime," and "Our children deserve better." Mayor Johnson approached the podium, dressed in a professional blue suit, her face composed but determined. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Yesterday, an incident occurred in our city that I believe requires our collective attention and action." She described what had happened without naming Andrew or Nancy, focusing instead on the pattern such incidents represented. "When children cannot freely move through their own community without suspicion, we have failed them," she said. "This is not about one person or one incident, it's about the culture we create together." Halfway through her speech, a stir went through the crowd. Nancy and Harold were making their way up the steps of City Hall. People whispered and pointed, recognizing Nancy from the videos that had circulated online. Her face was pale, but she held her head up as she joined the crowd. Mayor Johnson continued, outlining new initiatives: community forums on racial bias, reviews of 911 call procedures, and expanded youth programs to build bridges between different neighborhoods. "Next Friday, we will hold our first community dialogue at the Oakwood Heights Community Center," she announced. "I invite all residents to attend, especially those who wish to be part of the solution." At the end of her speech, reporters raised their hands with questions. One asked if the woman who made the call would face charges for filing a false report. Mayor Johnson paused before responding. "This isn't about punishment. It's about education and growth. We need to create opportunities for people to learn from their mistakes and do better." Another reporter pointed out Nancy in the crowd. "Is that the woman who called the police? Does she have anything to say?" All eyes turned to Nancy. For a moment, she looked frozen, but then Harold squeezed her hand encouragingly. She stepped forward. She began nervously. "I want to say I'm sorry for what happened. I made assumptions that were wrong and hurtful." Her voice grew steadier as she continued. "I've accepted the mayor's invitation to attend the community forum. I have a lot to learn, and I'm willing to listen." The crowd murmured in surprise. Many had expected denial or defensiveness, not this public acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, Andrew arrived home from school to find his parents watching the news coverage of the press conference. "They're still talking about it?" he asked, dropping his backpack. His mother nodded. "It's important, honey. What happened to you happens to too many kids, but most don't have mothers who can call press conferences." Andrew sat down, watching as the screen showed Nancy making her statement. She actually showed up. "Yes," his father said. "That took courage." Andrew was quiet for a moment. "Do I have to go to that forum thing?" His parents exchanged glances. "Only if you want to," his mother said. "But your voice matters in this conversation." 1 week later, the Oakwood Heights Community Center was packed. People from all parts of the city had come, filling every seat and standing along the walls. Mayor Johnson opened the event, then invited several speakers to share their experiences with racial profiling. When it was Andrew's turn, he walked to the microphone nervously. His parents watched from the front row, giving him encouraging smiles. "My name is Andrew," he began, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. "Last week, someone thought I didn't belong in their neighborhood because of how I look. But I do belong. We all belong. I'm a student. I like science and basketball. I want to be an engineer someday. And I just want to ride my bike to my friend's house without anyone thinking I'm doing something wrong." The room was silent when he finished, then erupted in applause. Even Nancy, sitting 3 rows back, was clapping, tears in her eyes. Later, as people mingled over refreshments, Nancy approached Andra and his parents cautiously. "I wanted to apologize to you directly," she said to Andra. "I'm truly sorry for what I did." Andra looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said simply. "It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement, a beginning." As they left the community center that evening, Andrew looked up at his mother. "Do you think anything will actually change?" Mayor Johnson put her arm around her son's shoulders. "Change happens one conversation, one person, one neighborhood at a time. Today was a good start." Andrew nodded, looking back at the community center where people were still talking, listening, and, most importantly, seeing each other for who they really were.